So there's this new global survey from Pew Research, and wow, it reveals a world that is deeply, deeply divided over Donald Trump. Today, we're going to unpack what that data shows and what it might all mean for America's standing on the world stage. The survey talked to people in 24 different countries, giving us a really fresh snapshot of his international standing. And let me tell you, the results paint a fascinating and, a super divided picture. But hey, before we even get to Trump, it's worth taking a look at how the world sees the United States itself. And it's perfectly split. A median of 49% have a favorable view, and an identical 49% have an unfavorable one. That initial split right there really sets the stage for the deep divisions we're going to see in the rest of the data. Okay, so let's start there. How has the world's view of the U.S. as a whole shifted in just the last year? Well, the shift is pretty stark. In key allied nations like Canada and Germany, favorability towards the U.S. has dropped and dropped sharply. And just look at Mexico. Favorability there plummeted 32 points in a single year. I mean, that's not just a little dip, right? That's a huge change in how people are feeling. All right, so let's narrow our focus a bit, from the country to the leader. How does the world's confidence in President Trump now stack up against their confidence in President Biden just 1 year ago? It's a dramatic drop. In Sweden, confidence just plummeted by 48 percentage points compared to Biden's ratings. In Germany, it fell 45 points. And to give you some perspective, Pew Research says these are some of the biggest swings they've ever seen on this question. That's huge. And you can see here, this isn't just one or two countries. We're talking about a really widespread shift. Views have become more negative everywhere from Mexico all the way over to Sweden, down to South Korea. It's hitting key allies all over the globe. So what's really going on behind these numbers? Well, the survey points to this. Complex and honestly pretty contradictory view of his personality. It's like people are holding two completely different ideas about him in their heads at the very same time. So on one side, you've got a median of 67% of people across these nations calling him a strong leader. And what's really wild is that this view has actually gone up in 19 countries since his last term. But then you flip the coin, and you see these overwhelming majorities with a totally different take. A median of 80% call him arrogant. 65% see him as dangerous. And his worst score? Honesty. Only 28% think that word fits him. So you've got this paradox, right? Strong, but also arrogant and dangerous. That's the global take on Donald Trump. Okay, so these clashing views, they get even sharper when we start to break down the data by politics and demographics. This is where things get really, really polarized. I mean, the gap based on political views is just massive. Take Germany, for example. If you support the right-wing AfD party, you're nearly 7 times more likely to have confidence in him than someone who doesn't. We're talking 56% versus just 8%. And you see the same kind of pattern pop up all across Europe with other right-wing populist parties. But it's not just about politics. The data points to another huge factor that's splitting opinions right down the middle. And that's the gender gap. It's pretty significant. In 17 of the countries surveyed, men are way more likely than women to have confidence in his leadership. And the drop among women in some places is, well, it's just staggering. Look at Sweden. Confidence among women went from 68% for President Biden all the way down to just 5% for President Trump. 5%! Okay, so we've talked about his personality. Now let's switch gears and look at how people feel about his ability to actually handle specific global problems. When it comes to the global economy, the skepticism is pretty clear. Only about 32% of people, on average, are confident he can handle it. That means a full 2/3 of people are not. And the numbers get even lower when you ask about the conflict between Israel and its neighbors. Confidence there drops to a median of just 29%. So there's widespread doubt about his approach to that really volatile region. But where he gets his absolute lowest marks is on climate change. A massive 72% median say they have no confidence in him on this issue. That's a huge point of friction with a world that's more and more focused on the environment. So what does all this mean for how the world sees the United States itself? I mean, in the eyes of the world, can you even separate the leader from the country they represent? Well, this survey suggests there's a really strong connection. Look at this. In a lot of the same countries where confidence in the president has dropped, the overall favorable view of the U.S. has also taken a hit. The two things seem to be moving together, which tells us that for a big chunk of the world, how they see the president really shapes how they see the whole country. And that feeling extends to views on American democracy itself. And what do you know? We see the world split right down the middle, again. About half say U.S. democracy works well, the other half says it works poorly. It just reflects this global view of America as a nation that's deeply divided. Which, it leaves us with one last really crucial question. When global opinion is this polarized, what does that actually mean for America's role on the world stage, for its alliances, for cooperation, for its whole identity as a global power? The data doesn't give us the answer, but it definitely frames the challenge ahead.